Man, the Manchester police are in a hurry today.
Yeah, they are. Man, I hope everyone's okay. So, last week, we explored the unsolved axe murder of a cobbler and the haunting that followed in Newtown, Connecticut.
That's right, we did.
We touched on the amount of pressure that police are under to solve crimes, especially when it comes to murder.
Well, yeah, nobody wants to think a murderer is on the loose in their community.
Exactly. So people need to feel safe where they live. This week, we've come to the small southern Vermont town of Manchester to explore another murder. A murder most foul. A murder with a supernatural element to it. But did the accused do the crime? Hey there, I'm Jeff Belanger. Welcome to episode 346 of the New England Legends podcast.
And I'm Ray Auger. Thanks for joining us on our mission to chronicle every legend in New England one story at a time. So many of our story leads come from you, so please write to us anytime through our website. We love hearing from you.
Also, this week we're thrilled to announce a new episode of the New England Legends television series has just dropped on Amazon Prime. In Season 2, Episode 3, we explore the story of the tree that ate Rhode Island founder Roger Williams. This is a strange one for sure. You can watch it now on Amazon Prime.
We'll explore this intriguing tale of murder and a prophetic dream right after this word from our sponsor. You know, Jeff, it wasn't that long ago that we explored the Dream Pond murders in Fairfield, Vermont.
Yeah, right.
What is it with Vermont and dreams and murders?
That's a good question. And you're right, there are some similarities with this wild case in Manchester.
Manchester is a small town. It was settled in 1761 with not much here except a few taverns and inns. It was a place to stop while on your way to someplace else. The population a century ago was 423 people, and today it's about 783 people.
Small town.
Small town.
In a town this small, everyone knows everyone. So something like a murder is going to rock the foundation of every single home.
It would big time. In a small town like this, you're going to know the victim and those closely affected.
Sure.
I'm sure it would be all anyone talks about. So let's head back to the year 1812 and meet the Boorn family. It's May of 1812 here in the small town of Manchester, Vermont. In national news, there's a lot of tension brewing with England. There's concern a second war may be coming. But here in Manchester, they have more pressing problems.
And those problems center on the Boorn family. The Boorn family have been in town for years. Barney Boorn has 3 children, brothers Jesse and Stephen, and a daughter named Sally. Life was fine until Sally married an odd duck named Russell Colvin.
What makes him so odd?
Well, he sits around a lot. Folks think he's lazy. He's also not very bright. He's been called feeble-minded. And sometimes he makes a strange spectacle of himself with odd outbursts.
Why did she marry him?
Well, though no one can be quite sure, it could come down to that there's just not many choices around for Sally. And it must be tough on the girl. I mean, folks don't like her husband, Russell. I mean, especially her brothers. They think he's a dolt and not good enough for their sister.
Family dynamics can be so difficult to navigate. There's nothing worse than family gatherings where someone is not wanted. It can only make everyone else miserable.
Yeah, so true. One May morning, Sally wakes up at first light and heads downstairs to the kitchen to get some food cooking for breakfast. Sally calls to her husband for breakfast, but there's no answer in the house. Only silence.
She searches the house, but her husband is nowhere to be seen. She sees his shoes are gone and figures maybe he left before dawn to run some errands and didn't tell her. By nightfall, Sally is getting worried. Russell hasn't been seen all day.
When Sally awakes, she races to her father's house. Russell's been gone for a day now with no word on where he was off to.
Sally's brothers walk around town with their sister asking folks if they've seen Russell. But there's something a little peculiar about brothers Jesse and Stephen today.
How so?
Well, they almost seem to be laughing about the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
They're teasing their sister that he must have run off because of her bad cooking. They don't seem to be taking this too seriously.
Still, no one around Manchester has seen or heard anything about Russell Colvin. Considering he wasn't well liked, he's not the kind of person that, people take note of.
Days go by, then weeks, and still there's no word from Russell Colvin. Plus, by June, everyone has bigger worries. America is once again at war with England.
Now, some wonder if maybe Russell Colvin ran off to fight in the war, or maybe he ran off to avoid fighting in the war.
As months pass, it's becoming clear that Russell Colvin is gone for good.
Months turn to years. The war in England comes to an end, and life goes on in Manchester, and for the Boorn family. Stephen moves to New York, but Jesse and Sally are still in town. Seasons pass, and all is quiet in Manchester. But that's about to change.
It's June of 1819. Amos Boorn is fast asleep. He's the uncle of Sally, Jesse, and Stephen. He's sleeping, but he's having frightening dreams. It's morning when Amos Boorn heads to town, still shaken by his vivid dream.
Amos tells town officials that in his dream, the ghost of Russell Colvin came to him and claimed he was murdered. The ghostly Colvin even showed Amos where his mortal remains could be found, by an old potato cellar on Barney Boorn's property.
Manchester officials find this dream intriguing, but still just a dream, right?
Right. But night after night, Amos dreams the same dream. The ghost of Russell Colvin comes to him to profess he was murdered, and his remains can be found on the Boorn Farm. After another visit with town officials, they're convinced they should at least investigate. A group of officials approach the old potato cellar and start to dig.
They find a button from a garment, they find what looks like a toenail, and pretty soon...
What's that white thing they're pulling from the ground?
It looks like a bone. And look, there's another one.
Oh, so a few bones are pulled from the ground. I mean, they're clearly bones, but do you think they're human?
One of the men run to town to fetch the doctor. I agree. I have no idea, Jeff. There's nothing obvious here like a skull.
When the doctor examines the bones, he believes they could be human arm bones. And that's all it takes. Everyone knows the Boorn brothers never liked their brother-in-law. That, combined with where the remains were found, lead to the arrest of Jesse Boorn. Stephen is also wanted, but he now lives in New York, out of Vermont jurisdiction.
In jail, Jesse Boorn shares a cell with a man named Silas Merrill, who was accused of forgery. After a few days of interrogations and claiming he's innocent, Jesse is returned to his cell.
And that's when his cellmate, Silas Merrill, claims Jesse confessed to him that he did murder Russell Colvin. And Merrill is willing to testify to that in exchange for his release from jail. So the deal is made, and Merrill walks free.
Under immense pressure from authorities, Jesse cracks, but claims it was his brother Stephen who did all the killing.
And since Stephen is in New York, he's beyond the reach of Vermont law. Though he can't make any arrests in another state, a Vermont constable finds Stephen Boorn in New York and explains the situation. Pretty soon, Stephen volunteers to return to Vermont to clear his name.
Meanwhile, those bones that were found?
Yeah?
More doctors have examined them and now believe them to be animal bones.
Oh, well, I'm sure this whole thing will be cleared up soon.
When Stephen Boorn returns to Manchester, Vermont, he's quickly arrested. After days of brutal interrogation, Stephen ultimately confesses to killing Russell Colvin, but claims he did it in self-defense.
Okay, but the jury didn't see it that way. They sentenced both Jesse and Stephen to hang. It's now 1820. The state of Vermont has commuted Jesse's sentence to life in prison, but they still intend to hang Stephen for murder.
Even though the doctors said those were animal bones.
Yeah.
Even though the brothers recanted their testimony and said they were innocent.
Yep.
Even though there's no body of the victim.
Correct. Stephen has just a few weeks to live.
I guess it would take a miracle to save him now.
A miracle or...
Wait, who's that rolling in town in that wagon?
I don't know. Oh, no way. That's Russell Colvin.
Wow.
He's alive.
Now, Colvin explains to the constable that he's been living in New Jersey. 8 years ago, he simply walked away from his life here in Manchester. And that brings us back to today.
The Manchester judicial system issues the following apology. Oops.
Ooh, oops.
No, I'm totally kidding. But yeah, both Boorn brothers were put through hell. And we can only speculate that there was some brutal interrogation methods used. Otherwise, why would they confess to a crime that they clearly didn't commit?
And that's the problem with torture.
Sure.
Eventually, the tortured person will confess to anything in order to make the punishment stop. Or police may convince a suspect that they have enough evidence to convict them, and if they confess, they'll go easier and lighter on them.
Well, like we said at the beginning, police are under a lot of pressure to solve crimes, especially violent crimes, and they're supposed to solve them quickly. No one wants a murderer on the loose in their community.
I'd like to think that the flimsy evidence presented in this 1812 case in Manchester, Vermont would never hold up today.
Sure.
No body of the victim, no evidence other than a dream.
Now, the dream part is really interesting to me. I can understand the local constable taking Uncle Amos's dream seriously. I mean, even if you don't believe in ghosts, why would an uncle rat out his nephews? The constable may have figured that maybe Uncle Amos heard something or witnessed something peculiar with his nephews and only put it all together in his dream. It was enough to raise suspicion. Enough suspicion led to an investigation, finding bones, then an arrest and conviction. The only problem was, and it's a minor one, Russell Colvin was still alive.
Technicalities. And that brings us to After the Legend, where we take a deeper dive into this week's story and sometimes veer off course.
Sometimes we do. After the Legend is brought to you by our Patreon patrons. We work for you. Gathering these stories each week, producing them, and presenting them takes a lot of time and money. So we appreciate our patrons helping us out with all of our costs. Everything we do is community-driven, so the more people in our inner circle, the more we can do. It's only $3 per month, and for that you get early ad-free access to new episodes, plus bonus episodes and content that no one else gets to hear. To sign up, head over to patreon.com/New England Legends. And if you want to see some pictures of Manchester, Vermont, click on the link in our episode description or go to our website and click on episode 346. Goodness.
Well, they found the bones.
Right.
And the uncle dreamt about where the bones were. So there might be something to that dream.
Well, sure. But it was also like, a potato cellar and animals could have been buried nearby or whatever.
Guess. But that's a coincidence.
So here's the thing.
One.
What's interesting to me is that the news and the public worked the same back then, more than 2 centuries ago, that it does today.
Oh, sure. That hasn't changed.
So think about it. So if you're in town and you hear, oh, now they think it was a murder. He had this dream. They found bones.
Right.
Then Doc said it was human.
Yeah, they're guilty.
Done. Right. So you're like, okay, human bones found where the dreamers said they would be found. They're guilty. Done. Months later, someone's like, oh, some more people looked at those bones and they might have been animal bones. Maybe you don't hear that.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't hear
or it doesn't
the update.
matter.
Or it doesn't matter. Oh, that's cover up.
Right.
Right. Like the damage is done. You've latched on to the first version of the story you heard, which was the fastest news, not necessarily the most accurate news.
Right.
And in an effort to get information in this tiny town, word spread, I'm sure, like wildfire. By dinner time, everyone had heard it, right? They found human bones. That dude was murdered. And it was murdered by those brothers that never liked him in the first place.
And now you're recalling, moments you've had with those brothers that have maybe been awkward. Like, oh, I remember that guy punched me in grade school. He's violent.
Yeah.
Got into a fight with that guy. And he yelled at me at the diner.
And their fate's sealed.
Yeah.
And then all this new information comes in. Like, no, they're not bones at all. They found a fingernail or a thumb or a toenail or something and a button.
Right.
Come on. Like, that could be anywhere. And that's all you found. So obviously that's a big problem. And then the ultimate, right? Like, someone was going to hang. If Colvin didn't come back to town, like, he would have been hanged.
He doesn't realize how important that was that he traveled back into town for those guys.
Right. Like, I mean, and then what do you say to your wife?
Right. 8 years? Was it 8 years?
8 years.
8 years.
Didn't really have the guts to tell you I wasn't interested anymore. I just thought I'd, leave.
We've done that. We did a story about a guy that left and came back years later too.
Yeah, but it was like 30 or 40 years.
Was that it? Yeah, that's right. And he stayed in town, right?
Ruth Colblath.
Was that it? Who
in
was?
New Hampshire. Yeah, the woman who waited.
Right, the woman who waited.
He went all over the world, but came back many, many years later to be like, I should check in on the old wife, right?
Yeah.
But
didn't he live out the rest of his years back there at that home?
Not a lot of time at the end because he was quite old by the time he came home. But yeah, he did live out the rest of his time.
It wasn't a visit. It was, I'm back.
Right. Hey, is dinner ready? It was 30 years ago. But she had a candle in the window every night.
Right,
she waited for him.
That's a cool story.
Yeah. And I guess part of it too, you have to put it in the context of the time. Divorce was really not allowed, was unheard of.
So you would just leave.
So you're trapped. So you're just like, well, I'll leave. They'll presume I'm dead and off we go. Right?
You can't find them. You can't find people. You don't have the GPS or the facial recognition software that we have now.
And think about it too. Like, so his poor wife, I mean, can't really remarry, at least for a good long time, until you're like, well, it's been 3 years since I've seen him. I'm going to just presume dead.
Right.
You know? So it's not like she can move on with her life. She's trapped.
And she didn't assume that he just left because people, like you said, divorce was unheard of.
Right.
And I'm sure people just didn't walk away.
Yeah.
Or maybe they did. I don't know. But she feared he was dead, not he took off on me.
Right, yeah.
Which the brothers made fun of. Oh, he left you because you were cooking. So they had that in the back of his head.
Which made the evidence later look peculiar. You guys were acting funny when you were looking for him because you knew he was dead.
Now, the uncle dreamed about it. So wouldn't you say, well, if you know where these bones came from, there's a good chance you did it. You didn't dream it.
Right, yeah.
Who's going to believe a dream?
Yeah.
So it took a lot for him to go to the police and say, I know where the bones are. Or I know where he could be.
When a person is murdered or goes missing, police will tell you 100 times, like 99 out of 100 times, it's someone darn close.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Spouse, in-laws, whatever, like someone's close, right?
They look at the husband first or the
Spouse
wife
first,
and
always,
then brothers, sisters, and then they work their way out.
You work your way out to like, okay, who else hated this person?
Yeah.
Because no one hates you more than family.
Yeah, always. If I go missing, Jeff, please check with my family because chances are somebody did it.
I'll be like, Molly, why'd you do it? Like, what do you mean? And she'll just crack.
Yeah.
You're like, come on. No,
you got to torture her.
Obviously. Yeah. But that's where police start because that's usually who did it. It's most likely suspect. And then, and also the dream thing. Vermont, how many more times? Someone going to have a dream and you're going to be like, that's not quite enough to hold up.
Doesn't hold up in court, I don't think.
But again, even in modern times, if someone came to the police and said, I had this dream that my nephews did something bad and this ghost is here and the body could be found here, I would listen to that if I was a modern day cop.
I think you have to check it out. Absolutely.
I'd be like, maybe you overheard something. Maybe it got processed in your dreams. Maybe you witnessed something and this is your way of telling me.
Yeah. Maybe you blacked it out too.
Yeah.
And it's in your head.
And like, I should at least go ask some questions and take a look.
Premonitions too, I would say. Just look into it.
Yeah. And that doesn't make you weird or anything. I would accept any police officer that would say, yeah, that's enough that I'll ask some questions.
Right.
Not enough for conviction.
No.
But at least knock on a door.
Yeah.
And say, hey, I'm looking into this thing. But no, it's I can only imagine what the interrogations were like. And by the way, this still happens today. I was looking at some news items where people still confess to crimes they didn't commit, even in modern times.
Recently, I've been watching some documentaries on, I don't even know what the subjects are, but one that I watched, they were going after some kids for a crime.
Yeah.
And the interrogations, they were just brutal with these kids to the point where the kids wanted to get out of there.
Yep.
And they just said whatever the cops wanted them to say.
It still happens.
Yeah.
And that could have been what happened then too. Like, hey, look, and maybe you're thinking under duress, right? Like, I'll just confess to it now. We'll get a lawyer. We'll investigate it. It'll all come out later that I'm innocent.
I just want to get out of this room right now.
But once you confess to something, it's hard to swim that back.
Especially if you're confessing to a cop.
Right. Yeah. You're confessing in an interrogation to a crime.
Right.
It's really tough to go back on that because why would you confess to something you didn't do?
Yeah.
Unless someone has sat in a room for hours and hours of just being berated by an officer who is under a lot of pressure to get some information or get a conviction.
And I'm sure they think to themselves, oh, this is going to last forever. Just the first suspect. Let's break him. Just so we can close this case.
Could be. Or the cop really thinks you did it.
Oh, maybe.
And they're just convinced that you did it. Yeah. And they just need to convince you that you did it.
Yeah. Because as we know, criminals do lie.
Of course they do. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. No, it can't be easy for sure. No question all around. But it still happens today where people will do that. And then, of course, everyone on the jury has to ask, why would you confess to a crime that you didn't do? And they weren't in a room.
I was hungry. They weren't feeding me. I just wanted to get out of there.
Yeah, right. Or I was tired. I hadn't slept. I was, they told me.
Sleep deprivation. That's another
They told
technique.
me they had all this evidence and it was going to point to me anyway. So if I confess, maybe I'll just get
Could you break easily?
I'd like to think I couldn't, but
me too.
we all have something.
I guess.
You know what I mean? You want a beer, Ray? Oh, no. You can't have this beer.
Yeah.
Not
a beer and a donut.
A beer and a donut. We're like,
do you want a basic batch donut?
Just confess, Ray.
Not a sponsor.
Just confess. And you'd be like, I did it. Well, what did I do? What's the crime? I knew it. Here, take the donut.
Where do you want me to sign?
Take the beer. Take the donut.
It might be worth it.
You're the Boston Strangler. What? Okay, fair enough.
If you've got a story you think we should check out, please reach out to us anytime through our website. We love hearing from you. Plus, most of our story leads come from you. Please also make sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. And if you post a review for us, we'd be most grateful.
We would.
Also, tell your friends about us. That's how we grow our community. You can also download our free New England Legends app on your smartphone and join our New England Legends Facebook group.
Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you so much to our Patreon patrons. And our theme music is by John Judd.
Until next time, remember,
The bizarre is closer than you think.